What happens when a machine slows? The system is built for motion, constant flow, continuous adjustment. So when it begins to slow, even slightly, the change feels unsettling, not because collapse has arrived, but because the rules that depend on momentum start behaving differently. This matters today because modern financial systems are engineered around continuation. Credit rolls forward, liquidity circulates, confidence reinforces activity, growth assumes movement, and stability assumes renewal. When that motion eases, assumptions that once felt invisible suddenly demand attention. To understand why slowing matters, we have to see the machine for what it really is. It is not just markets or institutions. It is a web of expectations. Expectations that tomorrow will look enough like today to justify decisions made now. Motion keeps those expectations aligned. At first, slowing appears harmless. Growth cools. Volatility fades. Activity pauses just enough to feel healthy. Many interpret this as balance returning after excess. The machine is not failing. It is adjusting. But beneath that calm adjustment, dependencies begin to surface. Systems optimized for speed struggle with pause. Revenues tied to volume thin. Funding tied to renewal hesitates. Models built for momentum lose clarity when momentum fades. This is a reveal beginning to form. The machine does more than produce outcomes. It sustains belief. When motion slows, belief must be rewritten. And rewriting belief is far more difficult than maintaining it. Institutions sense this early. Forecasts grow cautious. Commitments become conditional. Decisions that once relied on continuation now require justification. Without speed, uncertainty can no longer be outrun. The early tension forms here. Slowing is not crisis, but it removes cover. It exposes which structures were resilient on their own and which depended entirely on flow. What once looked stable now looks conditional. What happens when the machine slows is not immediate failure. It is a test of whether the system can function without constant motion supporting every assumption beneath it. As the slowdown settled in, behavior across the system shifted in ways that were easy to miss but impossible to ignore. Decisions stretched out. Approvals required more explanation. Confidence no longer arrived automatically. It had to be justified. Institutions felt the change first. Funding that once rolled forward with routine efficiency now paused for review. Assumptions baked into models were revisited. Growth targets softened not because demand vanished, but because continuity could no longer be taken for granted. Markets reflected this hesitation quietly. Trading volumes thinned. Price movements narrowed. Risk appetite cooled without dramatic headlines. The absence of urgency replaced the intensity of acceleration. Nothing was breaking, but nothing was rushing forward either. This is where the reveal deepened. Systems built for motion rely on speed to smooth over imbalance. When speed fades, unresolved tension surface. Leverage feels heavier. Dependencies feel closer. Structures that thrive during expansion feel exposed during pause. The early conflict sharpen here. Slowing forces choice. Projects must earn continuation. Capital must justify its place. The machine can no longer rely on flow to absorb mistakes. Efficiency gives way to scrutiny. Participants adapted unevenly. Some welcomed the clarity, seeing discipline return. Others struggled, having optimized entirely for growth. The same slowdown that restored caution also removed protection for those dependent on constant renewal. The system discovered an uncomfortable truth. Motion creates forgiveness. Pause creates accountability. When the machine slows, there is less room to hide behind momentum. What was once sustained by speed now face evaluation by substance. And that evaluation would determine which parts of the machine were built to endure and which were only built to move. The conflict reached its emotional peak when slowing turned into pressure. Not collapse, not panic, but strain that refused to be ignored. Cash flows tightened. Margins narrowed. Structures that depended on constant renewal began to feel heavy. This was the heart of the tension. The machine had never been designed to rest. It had been designed to keep going. And without speed to soften transitions, friction returned. Decisions that once felt automatic now carried weight. Every delay mattered. Institutions faced difficult trade-offs. Protect growth and risk fragility, or protect stability and risk stagnation. Neither option felt safe. Momentum no longer resolved uncertainty. It exposed it. The machine demanded answers that speed had postponed for years. Markets reflected the stress unevenly. Some assets held steady. Others drifted lower, without clear cause. Confidence fragmented. Participants disagreed not about facts, but about direction. The system no longer moved as one. The emotional weight of this moment came from realization. Slowing revealed dependency. It showed which outcomes were earned and which had been borrowed from the future. Years of acceleration had carried imbalances forward. Now, without momentum, those imbalances demanded attention. Pressure concentrated where preparation was weakest. Business models built on volume struggled. Balance sheets designed for rollover tightened. What had worked in motion felt exposed in pause. The buildup was complete. The slowdown was no longer temporary. It was a test of whether the system could function without constant expansion, and whether stability had been built for resilience or merely for speed. The resolution did not come from forcing the machine to speed up again. It came from learning how to operate without depending on constant motion. The system began adapting to a slower rhythm, not as a failure, but as a different state of balance. The climax arrived with a clear realization. Speed had been doing more than driving growth. It had been concealing weakness. When motion slowed, those weaknesses surfaced, not as threats, but as information. And information changed behavior. Institutions recalibrated priorities. Survival mattered more than expansion. Cash flow mattered more than projections. Structures were evaluated by endurance, not acceleration. The machine learned to function without momentum doing the work for it. Markets adjusted unevenly but decisively. Assets tied to real demand stabilized. Those dependent on perpetual growth repriced. Price discovery slowed, but it became more deliberate. Movement reflected capacity instead of expectation. The resolution reshaped how strength was defined. Resilience replaced speed. Stability was no longer about keeping everything moving at all costs. It was about maintaining function when movement could not be assumed. What endured was the final lesson of the machine slowing. Systems built only for acceleration struggle when asked to pause. But systems that can slow without breaking gain something more valuable than speed. They gain choice. When the machine slows, it separates durability from dependence. It reveals what was real and what was borrowed from momentum. And it forces the system to confront whether its foundations can carry weight without motion lifting them. Slowing is not collapse. It is clarity. And clarity, once revealed, cannot be ignored. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.